Zach is a dedicated family man who, like on countless other days, drives his son Mandla back to their home. The streets remain congested with typical traffic, and the city continues its usual pace. Yet hidden within that ordinary chaos, two contract killers are quietly executing a specific assignment. When their path briefly crosses with Zach's vehicle, the tension does not escalate immediately, since the visible presence of the child forces them to hold back and drive past. Meanwhile, in another district of the sprawling metropolis, the crime boss Eezy discovers that his personal driver has betrayed his trust. Such disloyalty carries a heavy price, and the man swiftly pays for his mistake with his life. Several hours later, Eezy requires a replacement, prompting his top lieutenant, Larumo, to train a fresh recruit. The pair navigate through the urban grid to familiarize the newcomer with routes, tactical maneuvers, and underground rules. Unaware of the forces aligning against them, fate once again intersects their path with Zach, who is once more traveling alongside his young son. At a busy intersection, their vehicles collide with tremendous force. The assailants demand answers, but Zach refuses to back down, firmly stating that they ran the red light. The verbal exchange quickly turns hostile and rapidly escalates into a physical brawl. Amidst the scuffle, one of the thugs pulls a firearm to intimidate, but his partner, in a clumsy attempt to prevent a larger incident, accidentally redirects the weapon's aim. The stray bullet strikes Mandla directly. Zach's entire world freezes in that exact moment. Overwhelmed with panic, he rushes his son to a nearby medical facility, clinging to the fragile hope that the boy might survive. At the same time, law enforcement officers manage to apprehend the driver involved in the crash. This individual, identified as Karwas, claims he knows nothing about the armed man and insists he was merely working as a taxi operator. However, the visible terror in his eyes clearly suggests he is concealing crucial information. Authorities present a lineup of suspects for Zach to identify the shooter, but none match the individual who fired the weapon. Moments later, consumed by confusion and emotional strain, he mistakenly points to one of the men and demands his immediate arrest. The officers explain that standard procedures must be followed, sparking intense frustration in Zach, pushing him to consider taking matters into his own hands with a weapon. Fortunately, the police intervene in time to calm him down and prevent a rash decision. A few hours later, the inevitable tragedy unfolds. Mandla succumbs to his injuries and passes away. The grief is absolutely crushing. His wife Portia sinks into a bottomless pit of sorrow. Zach, completely shattered inside, begins a dark and irreversible transformation. As days pass, the official investigation inexplicably loses momentum. Files go missing, and Zach's distrust of the police department deepens. Convinced that the system will never deliver justice for his son, he decides to pursue the truth independently. He walks through neighborhoods, consults underground contacts, and pieces together clues until he tracks down one of the perpetrators. Unfortunately, the criminal anticipates his moves and kidnaps him, dragging him to a secluded location intended for his execution. Just when all hope seems extinguished, an unexpected interruption occurs. A stray dog begins barking nearby, creating a distraction that gives Zach the split-second opportunity he needs to break free. Zach manages to flee and, during the ensuing struggle, ends up taking the life of his attacker. Despite this victory, he knows the actual shooter remains at large, the man who pulled the trigger on his son. That night, stained with blood and heavy with guilt, he returns home. Portia stands beside him in silence, both fully aware that nothing will ever bring Mandla back. The following morning, Zach visits the investigators, only to be shocked when he spots lead detective Floyd meeting privately with one of the suspects. He decides to tail them and uncovers a disturbing reality. A direct and illicit connection exists between Detective Floyd and the criminal syndicate responsible for the attack. The level of corruption runs far deeper than he ever imagined. Detective Layla, Floyd's partner and completely unaware of this treasonous network, continues pursuing justice through legitimate channels. Zach, meanwhile, has already figured out that the gang operates under the guise of taxi drivers. Desperate to defend himself, he asks his brother Zuko for a firearm, but Zuko firmly refuses. The argument escalates quickly, and during a physical struggle, the gun discharges accidentally, leaving Zuko wounded. Later, detectives Layla and Floyd inquire about Zach's whereabouts and question the family regarding a recently murdered taxi driver, but their mother claims to know nothing about the incident. Zach, increasingly consumed by retribution, finally tracks down his son's killer. He confronts the man and aims a weapon at him, but the criminal, overly confident, deliberately provokes him. Knowing that Zach still wrestles with his moral compass, the man taunts him, insults him, and, in a final act of contempt, even strikes him physically. Back at the residence, Zuko stumbles upon the extensive investigation Zach has been conducting and realizes the severe danger his brother is in. Zach, however, is captured once again by the gang members. They bind him, beat him, and make it painfully clear that crossing them guarantees severe repercussions. They decide to execute him in a particularly gruesome fashion, planning to feed him into heavy industrial crushing machinery. Just as all hope appears lost, law enforcement storms the facility. Detective Layla, tipped off by Portia, arrives at the scene. The criminals scatter and hide, and that brief window of chaos allows Zach to break free from the transport vehicle where he was being held. However, the nightmare is far from over. After the police withdraw, crime boss Eezy orders a complete wipeout of Zach's entire family. The hitmen breach his home. Zuko, still recovering from his gunshot wound, attempts to fight them off. He is quickly overpowered and takes 3 bullets. Portia manages to find a hiding spot and, weeping, tries to tend to Zuko's wounds, but it is already too late. When Zach finally arrives, he finds Portia alive, and they both conceal themselves until the assassins depart. Upon entering the main room, they discover that Zuko has died. The tragedies pile up, and the cycle of brutality shows no signs of stopping. A close informant begs him to stop, urging him to trust the legal system. But Zach has completely lost faith in institutional justice. He understands that the entire framework is rotten and that obtaining answers requires personal action. Channeling his anguish into pure resolve, he vows to continue until he avenges his son, regardless of the cost. The next day, during Mandla's funeral, Zach cannot bring himself to attend. Law enforcement is actively hunting him, labeling him a dangerous fugitive following the recent violent incidents. Watching from a distance, he witnesses the farewell to Mandla, his heart completely broken and helplessness eating away at him. The moment officers spot his location, they move in to apprehend him. But Zach manages to slip away. Only one thought occupies his mind: retribution, and he is prepared to do whatever it takes to achieve it. Determined to infiltrate the enemy ranks without raising alarms, he formulates a strategy. He prepares food deliveries and disguises himself as a courier. Maintaining a calm and convincing demeanor, he successfully gains entry to the hideout where those responsible for his son's death are operating. However, while attempting to locate his primary target, he is exposed, triggering a brutal brawl. In the middle of the fight, he loses his firearm and finds himself severely outnumbered. Still, in a desperate maneuver, he ruptures a gasoline-filled radiator to temporarily blind his opponent. Seizing the momentary blindness, he grabs a nearby metal hook and with lethal precision impales the man, ending his life. Before breathing his last, the dying criminal gasps out the truth Zach has been hunting for. The actual shooter was Karwas. He warns that completing this path of vengeance means going after him next. Armed with this knowledge, Zach heads straight for Eezy, the organization's leader, confronts him, and demands Karwas's location. Fearing for his own survival, Eezy agrees to cooperate, handing over every piece of intelligence he possesses while begging for mercy. At that exact moment, detectives burst into the room. The tension peaks when Layla uncovers the betrayal. Her partner Floyd is the mole who has been aiding the syndicate all along. Without hesitation, and carrying the full weight of her duty, she fires her weapon, ending his treachery permanently. Meanwhile, Zach is already on the move. Every step brings him closer to the conclusion of his relentless pursuit. When he finally corners Karwas, he confronts him with a rage that has been building for days. He overpowers him by force, fully intent on delivering his own brand of justice. Karwas, terrified, breaks down into pleas, insisting he never meant to fire, that it was a complete mistake, an accident born from pure chaos. But then, something entirely unexpected happens. Karwas's young son, acting out of pure desperation to shield his father, grabs a firearm and fires without real intent. The bullet strikes Karwas. Time seems to stand still. Zach, stunned, falls into a daze. The sight hits him with immense emotional force, and for a fleeting second, he hallucinates his own son standing before him. He embraces the vision, broken, whispering how much he loves him. as if granted a final chance to say goodbye. The illusion shatters when Karwas's son, trembling violently, aims the gun at Zach. Mortally wounded, Karwas begs his child to lower the weapon, to avoid repeating the same endless cycle of bloodshed. That instant creates a profound shift within Zach. Regaining his clarity, he finally understands everything, the suffering, the loss, and how vengeance only multiplies the damage. Without uttering another word, Zach stands up and walks away. Before leaving, he calls for medical assistance to treat Karwas, abandoning the chance to finish him off. Walking under the pouring rain with no destination, physically and mentally drained, his hands shaking, he leaves a final recorded message for Portia. In it, he acknowledges his failures. He admits that his choices pushed him too far, and that some mistakes are unforgivable. He knows she likely will not be able to forgive him either. He says goodbye with profound sorrow, yet also with a strange sense of peace. Ultimately, Zach walks away from the violence, not as a triumphant hero, but as a man who has lost everything. Thus, beneath the rain and in complete silence, he moves forward, searching for a tranquility that may never truly arrive. This concludes the story of 180. If you enjoyed this video, remember to leave your like and comment.